onward to the domain level. So let's go ahead and log out from here, switch back to our end user login, and I'm going to log in as normal. Now, if we go to the start menu here, because I have God mode, I have access to the system level, the tenant level, as well as the domain level here. So domain management, this is the level of admin where we're going to spend most of our administrative time. And we begin with the start page, which show us the 4 most common operations that we're going to do within NetBrain domain administration. So let's start by talking about discovery. Discovery, as I think I said before, is the process of figuring out what's present on the network and how to talk to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a discovery method. We're going to choose, in addition to SNMP, how do we want to try and talk to the device via CLI? If it's what's called a seed discovery, what is the discovery depth? We'll talk about what that means later. For traditional devices, we put in IP addresses or host names of places to start. And then for API-based systems, we need to select the servers that we're going to be talking to from here. And then we would just click Start Discovery. Now, before we can get into what's happening on the back end, before discovery can begin, we need to discuss 4 tables, one of which is absolutely mandatory that we configure before NetBrain can even perform discovery, and the others, some of which may be needed, some of which may not be needed. So let's go ahead and go to the start menu here. And besides discovery under domain initialization, here's the 4 things. So the network settings, also known as the shared network settings, this is where we store the credentials that NetBrain needs in order to actually talk to stuff on the live network. So we have our front servers listed here. Now this information comes down from the system level, of course, and we can't change anything except the order in which they're listed. Now this order is very, very important potentially, because what it's going to do is it's going to tell NetBrain what order to use when it's trying to discover devices. You see, when NetBrain's trying to find a device, it's going to start with one credential set of a given type and then go down the list until it finds something that works. And the first thing that actually works for that device, NetBrain's going to save, okay, this device is going to use this particular user pass, this particular community string, this particular front server, etc. So this goes for all 6 types of credentials here. You want to list it as in the order of popularity, the most commonly used stuff first. So we have our front servers, we have our SSH private keys, we have our jump servers, which NetBrain can use for CLI access specifically, if desired. Our unprivileged CLI usernames, our privileged CLI passwords and possible usernames as well, and finally SNMP community strings. We support version 1, version 2C, and version 3 of SNMP. And NetBrain does not care if you give it read-only or read-write strings. It will treat them as if they are read-only. So those are our basic device credentials, and you have to configure this or just discovery is impossible. Next, if we have any API-based systems, in other words, things that are managed from a centralized controller rather than being individual devices, what we need to do is we need to go to the API Server Manager and point NetBrain to these controllers. When we specify a controller, we specify everything that it is controlling. So in other words, if it's, in this case, I'm connecting to a Cisco ACI deployment, I want to point it to the APIC, as it's called, the controller. So I would include the prefix here and put either the IP address or the host name, what user pass, what front server. And again, when I select this for discovery or for benchmarking or anything, when I select a controller, I am selecting everything that it is controlling. Okay. So that's primarily what we do here in the API Server Manager. We might need to connect NetBrain to other third-party systems in order to gather detailed information from, say, PRTG or Snow or BMC Remedy or whatever. So that's an entirely different kettle of fish there that I'm not going to talk about in detail unless someone wants to after class. So next, do not scan may be required to do discovery. It may not. So do not scan defines a list of devices either by IP address or range on the one hand, or by identified device type on the other, where NetBrain will, in the course of discovery, if it's not already discovered into the domain, if something new is found and it matches either one of these, NetBrain's going to say, oh, I know nothing, like Sergeant Schultz, and pretend it doesn't exist and move on. So note that for device types, the device has to be correctly identified as the device type before it gets excluded. And then for over here, it can be it could be IP addresses, IP ranges, or both. And blocking a port is fine, but if then NetBrain finds another port for that device that is not blocked, then the device will be discovered, including the blocked port. So that's do not scan. And then finally, the network definition table. Remember, we saw a little bit ago, we saw the vendor model table where we have the big list of sysobject ID strings. So remember, those strings are retrieved via SNMP. Now, what do we do with devices that where we can have CLI access but not SNMP access? It's rare, but it does happen. How on earth are we going to make NetBrain understand which driver it's going to need to use for those particular devices? The answer is that we can't. So we need to ahead of time specify by, again, IP address or IP range, and then specify what type of device it is and what driver to use. And then if NetBrain can't identify something via SNMP, it will fall back on this and try to use this appropriate driver. So any questions before we go into the theory behind our discovery process? Okay. So let's switch back to the slide deck here. So front server status, we just talked about all this. Okay. What I really want is this. Okay, so this is the discovery process for what's called seed discovery, where we tell NetBrain to jump from one neighbor to another. So with range discovery, we're going to specify a range of IP addresses or a list of individual IP addresses or both. And then NetBrain's going to do a process very similar to this, but it's going to just do it once for each IP address and not try to relate it to anything else. With seed discovery, however, we want to specify seed addresses that are in the core layer of the network ideally, and we should have at least one per every physical location. So we start out with each IP address by trying to ping it. And so this ping can be bypassed by NetBrain. But if it fails and it's not bypassed, then our discovery process will stop by default. And then it goes on to the next potential neighbor candidate and so forth. So then it's going to either because the ping has been bypassed, the ping check, or because it's responded in some way, it's going to proceed to the SNMP assessment. And then if we fail the SNMP assessment, we have the option